Welcome to our webinar today on education. Have universities abandoned their academic mission, and can it be restored? Our presenter, Mark Mercer, is familiar to some of you as he participated in our series on free expression. But Mark, you're from Nova Scotia. You're in a professorial role. You're still earning milk in the fridge. And you've also got an academic role at the Higher Education Association level. So before we begin, give us a little bit of background on what your interests are and why you think you're here today.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Barry. My main interests are in philosophy of mind and epistemology, or the study of knowledge justified belief. But I also have interests in value theory, in ethics, and I teach a lot of critical thinking and logic. That's the bread and butter of my university work. Most of the students I teach in courses on critical thinking and courses in logic. Now, I'm at St. Mary's University in Halifax, and I've been here 24 years now. Before that, I taught at University of Calgary for a couple of years, and Okanagan University College, St. Cloud State in Minnesota. So I spent a few years on the road between getting my doctorate and finally landing a tenure track position at St. Mary's. And I love teaching philosophy, and I love talking about philosophy and writing philosophy. I think, other than the critical thinking courses where there is something that you're meant to accomplish, right? In a critical thinking course, you want the students to come out able to recognize that an argument has the pattern modus ponens, or that an argument is fallacious or whatever. So there's, that specific content you got to get across. But in more strictly philosophical courses, I just want us to get together with the students to think hard about difficult, interesting topics. So, for instance, in a philosophy of mind course, we'll want to ask, for instance, are emotional states actually cognitive states? Are we trying to do something when we get angry, right, rather than merely react? And then it's just a conversation, it's a discussion. So that's what my ideal of a university, of the university mission, is to gather people who like to think hard about difficult topics. They think hard about difficult topics in community with each other, so that they can expose their ideas to criticism, so that they can then respond to that criticism, change their minds, develop their theories, whatever. Now, you mentioned the national organization to which I belong. I'm a member of the Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship, and I was president of that society for 8 years. I stepped down in May. Robert Thompson is now the new president. Good luck, Robert. Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship has been around about 32 or 33 years now. I discovered it in the early 2000s, I think 2005 or 2006. It was the only organization of academics that thought that the treatment that Peter March was receiving at St. Mary's University by the administration, after he posted the Jylland Post and Muhammad cartoons on his door, was
Give me
wrong.
some background on that before.
Peter's a now retired colleague of mine, and you might remember that in, I think it was 2005, maybe 2006, at any rate, in the mid 20 a Danish magazine called Jylland's Posten organized invited 12 cartoonists. Well, invited a number of cartoonists, many who refused to contribute cartoons featuring Muhammad. Now, funnily enough, some of the entrants, it was characters named Muhammad. There was a schoolboy named Muhammad in one of the cartoons. So not all of the cartoons, in fact, featured the Prophet Muhammad. But you may remember that there were riots and deaths associated with this, and calls for the Danish government to take action against the magazine Jylland's Posten. Any rate, because no media sources were publishing the cartoons, Peter thought, well, people need to know what all the fuss is about. So he posted the cartoons without commentary on his office door. Posting things on your office door is a tradition, a long tradition among university professors. There are some of us whose doors are covered with stuff. There's some who don't post stuff on their doors, but many of us do. So Peter posted the cartoons on his door, intending thereby to make them public. Now, the administration had them taken down immediately and didn't say something like, we regret that for security reasons or safety reasons, we have to remove these cartoons. They said that occasionally, but they didn't mean it. Most of their talk was about how upsetting this would be to the Muslim students at St. Mary's. And St. Mary's used to, I don't know if it's still the same, but used to attract quite a few Muslim students. Muslim students coming to English-speaking universities did prefer ones that had a religious orientation. They thought it would be friendlier for devout Muslims, even if it's associated with Catholicism, whatever. St. Mary's is a public university, by the way, but because of its name, because of its history, it was attractive to Muslim students, especially in the business schools. And it was pretty clear that that was what the administration took umbrage at, the possibility that Muslim students were being offended. They also allowed complaints against Peter March for discrimination and harassment to go forward. And so Peter was called before a board. It was a fiasco. There was a report commissioned for this board that was that took sides, and so had to be thrown out. And there were two professors and a student were impaneled to adjudicate in this case. They were going to come back and say that no, Peter March had not harassed anyone or discriminated against anyone in order by putting these cartoons on his office door. But the person who was overseeing this thing told the students and advised that they withdraw their complaint so that a precedent wouldn't be set. So indeed, there was no finding with regard to whether there was harassment or discrimination. The complaint was withdrawn. The university spent lots of money, lawyers, all the rest, a total waste. Now, at the time, I thought that if I wrote a letter to the academic vice president, copied the president, explaining how their actions were in violation of academic freedom and the openness of the university, that they would see that they'd just been caught in the passion of the moment and would change their ways. But that did not happen. Indeed, they doubled down on it. I discovered the Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship at the time because they came out and said that Peter March was being mistreated by his university. And so a little later, I joined and became a member of the board of directors, I think, in 2009. And then president in 2015 for 8 years. And now I'm just back on the board of directors. So anyway, that's the society tries to track cases where we think that academic values have been violated or put at threat, where we think the academic mission of a university is at threat. We write letters, we have a newsletter, we sponsor talks, and try to get the message out, try to explain what academic values are and why they're important.
Let's pick up on that, because that is in fact in the title, and some have felt that the title itself is provocative because it makes an assumption that the universities have abandoned their academic mission. Sometimes you put a title together just to catch attention, and can it be restored? But tell us, what do we mean by the academic mission, and why would someone feel that it's under threat?
Well, by the academic mission, I think the mission of the institution, right, the organization, the institutions function to protect practices. So the practices here are the practices basically of teaching and inquiry. the practices of holding a class, a seminar, writing papers, discussing matters with each other. And so the institution is there to protect that, preserve it, enable it to continue on. Now, the institution has to deal with power and money, right? These are the things that the institution has to deal with in order to see that the mission go through. But if what I think has happened is that the academic mission, the mission of creating a space in which academics, and I mean both professors and students, can gather to think hard about things, to interpret poems, to interpret social phenomena, to run experiments, to convene in symposia, to do all the things that academics do. That mission has been put at risk because non-academic things have come to predominate. So, for instance, I'm sure you're familiar with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in universities. Now, whether there's a problem that needs to be solved or not, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, as we've seen them so far, are not the way to solve that problem, whatever that problem might be. So, one of the initiatives is to hire professors on grounds of sex or race, sometimes cultural affiliation, sexual orientation, but mainly on grounds of race or sex. Now, race and sex are not of academic salience. They're things academics study, but an academic's race and academic's sex is not of academic moment. Now, even if it were the case that Black scholars gravitate to certain areas of study and study them in certain ways, let's say, still, what we would find out from the dossiers submitted would be far superior than looking at the skin color. Suppose your department thinks, oh, we need someone who is taking racial tensions in, say, medicine seriously, or a sociology department. Hey, look, nobody here is investigating matters of race and social class. Oh, well, let's hire someone whose research is in that area. Well, the best thing to do is look at the dossiers and look at the invite the person in to give an academic talk and all the rest, like we usually do. So even if there's some correlation between race and interests or method, still the way to hire a scholar is to look at the accomplishments, look at the work. Now, if a university isn't doing that, if a university isn't looking at the work, but looking at something else first, and there are positions where being a member of a particular culture or ethnicity or sex or race gives you a preference. And there are even some where the hiring is restricted to members of certain classes, racial, cultural classes, whatever. If you're doing that, you're saying that the academic mission is secondary. We're going to fulfill some other mission first, and after we fulfill it, or while we're going about that mission, well, we'll let whatever the academics do, we'll let them do that. But that's secondary to the academic mission. So a university that cares about its academic mission above all employs only academic criteria in making academic decisions. Until, of course, those criteria run out, right? I mean, maybe down the end, there's nothing to decide on academic grounds, but only at the end. Academic decisions made on academic criteria only. That's the mark of an institution serious about about the practices it's supposed to be protecting. And many universities show that they're not serious about the practices that they mean to be protecting. So that's one example, but this also gets into into research and the classroom. You probably know that universities these days like strategic plans. And what would a strategic plan for a university be? There might be small little plans that one could make, but a university-wide strategic plan, what could that be all about? But well, of course, the goal is to keep the administrators busy, right? To give their offices something to do. But another goal is to take um, academic concerns out of the professor's hands, bring them up to the level of the dean, or bring them up even higher. So the mission will say something then like, our university is committed to experiential learning. But if the university is committed to experiential learning, then the professors are pressured to engage in experiential learning, or whatever it might be, interdisciplinary work. But these are things that fall under academic freedom, the freedom of the professors to choose their areas of inquiry and their means of inquiry. So if your university has a strategic plan, and the strategic plan says that our university is committed to this, that, or the other thing, even if these are wonderful things to be committed to, well, that's applying pressure to individual professors to conform. And that's to devalue academic freedom, also to devalue the autonomy of the academic units, the departments. Departments should be setting their own curricula. But then if the university senate, the administration, whatever, says to a department, well, here's what you're to be doing, then that department no longer enjoys departmental autonomy. And then that means that the professors in that department are no longer fully in charge of what they're doing.
Are you being overly sensitive? I mean, strategic plans are not laws, they're guides. When someone says, we're going to execute affirmative action for a few years because we want to see some balance, this is not mandatory. This is a gentle persuasion. We're going to evolve. This is not meant to be a revolution. Let's be serious, and maybe you are being serious. How much is this?
I am being serious. Even the gentle persuasion coming from the university administration is an imposition on a potential violation of the autonomy of the academic unit and the academic freedom of the professors. Now, what the professors can do, of course, is organize symposia. I mean, you have some professors who think that by engaging in preferential hiring or engaging in restricted hiring, the university would fulfill its mission better. Well, organize a talk, bring it up. But then it's up to the individual professors. The individual professors on the hiring committee, right, who've been told, oh, you'd better hire a X, or the university's not going to look well on your department. Well, they're now under pressure. They're under pressure to do things that may not coincide with their academic vision of the university.
So
now, of course,
bottom line here is as well. I mean, we're abandoning merit as a relevant value in making decisions on what should have value on campus. It's more social alignment than it is on the merit or the academic merit.
Well, that's right. And so when I say academic decisions on academic criteria alone, well, we want the people who can serve the academic mission best in the judgment of the people on the hiring committee.
So how long has this been going on? How long has this been going on? And has it really had any impact? Is there really a shift in the orientation, or is this just a moment? It'll pass.
Well, no, it's a shift in the orientation. It's been going on for a long time. This has been going on since the late 1980s, but not with the fervor that it gained around 2015 or so. And certainly, university administrations have used the COVID crisis to their advantage in trying to pursue their own goals rather than the academic goals of the university. But no, it's been around for a long time, and it has changed things. Look at sociology, for instance, sociology or anthropology. I I don't think the quality of sociology, academic sociology today, is as high as it was 20 years ago, or 30 years ago. I think it has had an influence. Some of the topics are trite. Some of the results seem preordained. That you better not investigate it fully. If you come up with the wrong conclusions, then you might not get published. Let me give you an example. I think a friend of mine, Stephen Parrott, is a psychologist who does research on policing. And in his research, he's discovered that there doesn't seem to be any statistically significant indicators of racism against Blacks on the part of police officers. That conclusion, in one of his papers, it took a long time to find some journal that was willing to publish this. There's another study he did about women police officers. And it seems that, I forget what the percentage is, let's just say 20%, but I might be wrong about that. There seems to be a ceiling beyond which police departments cannot hire any more women. They get to about 20%, and try as they may, it doesn't increase to 25 or 30%. And the thought might be, well, we want a police force that's 50% women, or at least 40% women. And police departments have been spending resources on trying to recruit more women into the ranks, and it ends at about 20%. And again, it might be 15 or 25. I'm not sure, but there's some percentage well below 50 at which police departments seem to be unable to hire above that percentage. And then he's come in. He's done surveys. And he's asked, why is this the case of women police officers, women police recruits, women who don't have any interest in policing? And it turns out that there's only about 20% of women in the population who would think policing would be a fine career. It's much higher among men. Not every man wants to be a police officer, but for many men, it's not something that they would say, absolutely no. So the percentage of women on police forces seems to correlate with the percentage of women who, in the general Canadian population, who are interested in being on police forces, being police officers. And that research of his, I think, was 4 journals he had to submit to before it was finally published, and journals asking for changes to some statements. And I think this is happening frequently. Now, I don't have, unfortunately, I'm not a sociologist, so I don't have the statistical information here. But I do think that something like taking the correct line gets research published more easily than research that attempts to look at both, one side, the other side, the third side.
Okay, well, I can understand public institutions receiving financing from the taxpayer through the government are going to be somewhat sensitive to what we might have as civil missions in our society, with the university having some role to play there. So if there's a misalignment, so be it. But there are pressures on universities to maybe restore. And I know in Alberta in 2019, I think it was the McKinnon Commission, Mike Percy and others were on it, concluded that it was time for universities to be held accountable, and started tying funding to performance. Now that didn't go over all that well, and it's not done. I gather that it's now been reinvigorated, but are there others? Is this attempt by government as the owner, in essence, as the public representative of the taxpayer, expecting academic alignment and using the dollars as a leverage is going to have any impact on universities other than a lot of protesting and marching on the governments?
Well, I'll be marching on the governments for sure. That's frightening. Because what does performance mean? That would be up to the testers, the government, and then that would again put pressures on the universities to teach in certain areas, to teach in certain styles, and the like. Um, I well, let me put it this way.
Freedom, you used the phrase yourself in an earlier webinar on with freedom comes responsibility.
I don't think I said that, but okay, but I suppose it's true. But what did I mean?
Well, what do you think responsibility means? I mean, we have public institutions that are bound by academic freedom. Are there no limits to academic freedom? Is it perfectly acceptable to proclaim that let's purge the Jews?
Yeah, well, our freedom comes with this responsibility, the responsibility to be the best academics we can be, to engage in research and teaching as best as we can. And I'm in favor of universities having the power to impanel professors to look at a professor whose work has allegedly slipped below a certain standard, and then make recommendations. That's fine, but academic freedom, yes, the freedom to create your syllabus, the freedom to write, to create the tests and the essay assignments. All of that is part of it, part of what being an academic is. I think it also includes freedom of expression. I think that freedom of expression ought to be protected under academic freedom clauses in collective agreements. Often it is, and that's a good thing, and it should be generally. Why? Because we don't want to place any pressures other than the pressures of argument and evidence on professors and students.
So where is the boundary between anarchy then and academic freedom? Or is it always going to be a soft edge? I mean, I don't want to get extreme, and we can play the game of taking extreme positions, but for academic discussion, where is the boundary between anarchy and academic freedom?
Well, what do you mean by anarchy? What's on
There
the other side?
Let's say no rules at all.
I don't think professors should be, and students as well, free to say what they want, investigate what they want.
So
If they're
is violence within the boundaries of expressing academic freedom?
you mean acting violently? Certainly not. No.
Okay, so we have a boundary.
Well, but that's okay. I see what you're getting at. You want to say like to act violently might be an expressive act, right?
Well, I'm looking for some guard rules. I mean, we worry about artificial intelligence, and we put guard rules down for fear that it will take us into territory we wish as a society or as a civilization we'd like rather not go. So I have to presume that government as a regulator has reasonable discussion with the university as to when it is within and when it's outside those guardrails. And it seems to me the expression of violence enters into that discussion, particularly nowadays.
Well, sure. If we're talking about something like credible threats, then that's for the government to deal with. Yeah. So maybe I could put it this way: I don't think there should be any restrictions on what professors say or advocate, except the laws in a democratic society. It's not for the university to police that or
And
to
the same
get
then with the students. So if the standard is that for the professor, it's also that standard for students while they're on campus.
Right. And, we do have, and I'm happy we have laws against credible threats, um, threats, intimidation, that sort of stuff. That has to be dealt with. And, for me, dealt with in a way, you remove the person who's issuing threats, you remove the intimidator, so that the rest of us don't feel that intimidation anymore. It's not, I mean, the point is not to penalize bad behavior. The point is to create the conditions under which people can go about their academic work, either as professors or as students. Now, you raise this, but I don't know that there's, anything is possible, and anything probably has happened somewhere in the world. But in Canada today, I don't think credible threats from professors or credible threats from students is a major worry. I might be wrong about that, and I would hate to write rules into university policy books to deal with something that is not a pressing matter at all,
But
for fear that they'll be abused. That these rules.
students are saying we need safe spaces now. We're feeling intimidated, and the university has a responsibility to create some safe spaces to us, because intimidation is an emotional reaction. It's not necessarily logical. It may be based on something we know very little about.
Right.
The student says, "I feel intimidated." They've entered into that realm that you're talking about. They're expressing an emotion, and the university feels obligated to create some safe spaces for them, and to say that the university environment and the discourse that we have will be conducted in a safe manner, and you're not feeling safe.
Very good. One thing that we professors have failed, and failed dismally, is acclimatizing, socializing our students to the world of the university. Um, and some students, and happily, it might just be that I'm a philosophy professor, and so I don't, encounter too much of this. I have encountered some of it, but it's not, the daily thing for me with my students is self-censorship, is fear of speaking. I don't find too many students are saying, oh, this is intimidating, or oh, my safe space has been violated. But as professors, when we have our first year students, part of it is to socialize them into the world of intellectual freedom, the world of caring to get things right. Now, the professor is there to invite students into this world and to help students navigate this world, but it's not our job. We have no moral authority to try to instill these values in our students. 4 years, 3 years of 3 4 years of university, they leave. They don't want anything to do with it ever again. Well, that's fine. Right, so we're not out to engineer their souls in any particular way, but we are there to help them adapt to this particular environment. And if that environment changes in such a way that it's no longer an academic environment, then I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. Those of us who want to work and function as academics, and those students who want to do so as well. At any rate, they don't get a chance to taste it. They don't get a chance to see what it's like to live the life of the mind for 4 months, and then Christmas, and then 4 months, and then off for the summer, and then 3 years later, never again.
Okay, so talking about the student, then we are living in an increasingly multicultural society.
Well, I don't know that matters. So you've mentioned it a couple of times. A university maybe draws people from all sorts of cultures, but it's as monocultural as an army. An army has a mission. A university has a mission. So you come to the university from all sorts of cultures, but when you're there, you're an intellectual or an aspiring intellectual. That's now your culture. Your culture is the culture of the life of the mind. And
but you've talked that in an orientation. I mean, I can't help but feel warm to hear that it's a culture of the mind. I'm not sure how many students enter in with feeling it's a culture of access to jobs, and but I won't push that very far. But I think we are in a world where you have a different student profile than you had 20 years ago, and you've already indicated preparing students for this world of exploration and the boundaries that go with it. What are the impacts on you as a professor? When you look at a classroom today, does your curriculum change? Does your sensitivities, your tolerance, your expectations, are they hitting you harder than they did before with regard to your own values?
no, there are a number of questions there, so the no might only be for for some of them. But no, the curriculum does not change. The curriculum changes in response to pressures of argument and evidence. The curriculum changes if I discover that some question is not interesting anymore because some development somewhere, or I changed my mind. But the curriculum doesn't change in response to changing student demography. I don't know that. I mean, I just haven't noticed if there is a changing student demography. I don't know. I look in the around the classroom. I see people of various skin colors and two or three or however many sexes or whatever. What matters is the problem at hand. We're discussing whether the criterion of falsifiability, trial and error, is preferable to the idea that we can achieve certainty if we corroborate our theories off of. Now, there's the problem at hand, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about that argumentatively, disputationally, and see where it leads us as a class and where it leads us individually. Now, I will say that university is university as I conceive it, right, a culture of disputation, a monocultural disputatious culture, thinking hard about difficult problems. This is a very strange and weird thing for creatures like us with human psychologies. The last thing any of us wants to hear is that we're mistaken about something, and yet that's built into, or should be built in. And again, I worry that universities have changed their mission. The culture is now one of celebration of cultures, celebration of identities, celebration of emotional orientations or whatever, rather than, well, let's talk about emotional orientations and dispute about them. So I worry that the culture has changed, but for people actually to get together and say, here's my theory of how this thing is going on. Now you take it away and you criticize it, and you come back to me with your criticisms, and maybe through your criticisms we can develop the theory even better. That's a very strange thing.
Let's stop right there, because I would be thrilled to know that every university in Canada has as an orientation course on philosophy and religion, critical thinking, to prepare the student for the years ahead when they're in university. What I hear you saying, I like a lot. I'm not sure that your sentiment is echoed by very many campuses and by those on campuses, or that the students are aware of the environment that they're going into. Are they
Kerry,
getting?
that's my worry. That's that's exactly my worry. That many at universities, not just students, some professors, maybe many professors, almost all administrators, have lost sight of that academic mission. There are other missions that they think are important, that they want to pursue. Some of them would pursue these other missions in rather than the academic mission, but I think many of them just don't see that the academic mission is to create a space for disputatious inquiry into the things of the world.
Well, many may prefer just to avoid it altogether. I mean, there are 2 points I have in my notes here. One of them is we were hearing last week that critical thinking on some campuses to tell you what to criticize. And
Yes.
what you're going to learn is what is good and what is bad from the perspective of the environment that you've just bought into, rather than give critical thinking. The other one was I was reading recently that the humanities are on the decline, other than philosophy, by the way. That the students and or the universities themselves are becoming much more pragmatic, much more job oriented, and much less interested in the discussion that we're talking about now that builds a healthy critical thinking society. Both of
Yes.
those are worrisome.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I'm a pluralist about universities as well, or they're all called universities. Why not bring back the terms like polytechnic,
We have
college,
we have we have those. We
you
have
know. So I think that I don't mind if there are some institutions that call themselves universities that are directed toward that try to understand what the job market is like, and then try to produce people to take their position in the world of work. I'd like them to advertise themselves as such, and what would really matter is that in every Canadian province, and then eventually in every Canadian province and territory, there be at least one academic university,
Mhm.
at least one university where the goal is to gather people together who value their intellectual and moral autonomy, who engage disputatiously in thinking hard about things of the world, who engage disputatiously in inquiry and investigation and interpretation and appreciation, um, all of these things, so that all all young people in Canada have an opportunity to attend such a university, if only to find out what it's like, because maybe it's not for them. But for many students coming out of high school, coming into St. Mary's, they've never had that sort of engagement, and they find that they're ready for it, and they find that they enjoy it. They might not be terrifically good at it yet, because they haven't been prepared for an academically rigorous environment. But they enjoy it and they're enthusiastic, and we can work with them.
I can,
And so,
I,
this is why I want these institutions to remain, or at least this tradition to remain within the universities.
I think I've expressed my similar or inclination. My degree, my initial degree, was a liberal arts degree, which was one of inquiry, one of discovery. And I can recall my parents being a little bit concerned that I was bringing home questions that they'd never given any thought to. And I can remember being introduced and reading my first text on philosophy, of asking questions. I can't imagine, where the hell did that question ever come from? Whoever asked, what is beauty anyway? I mean, and there I was in high school, beginning to get ready for college and reading these books. And what is this experience going to be all about? But that was quite the eye opener. And philosophy and religion was a fundamental core course in the curriculum before we got into some of the deeper stuff later on. I agree with you. I think liberal arts plays a fundamental role, and I think we should be orienting kids before they even get to college on those topics. I've got one other point, and then I'm going to open it up for discussion. There is a new player on the block. It's called artificial intelligence. And as you and I have chatted about earlier, it could be a game changer for institutions that claim that they are the bastions of knowledge, or even the bastions of critical thinking, because whether it be the chat GPTs or their brethren or their offspring, there's something going on in the world of knowledge management that may be in competition with academia. Have you seen yet the embracing or the fear of what artificial intelligence may well mean to the academic institutions that you're familiar with?
Certainly the fear. I've seen a lot of fear. I share some of it myself. I want, though, my hope is that as soon as you are concerned that something will happen and you take steps to prevent it, you might be taking steps that interfere with with what you want to happen with with the good stuff. So I haven't yet said anything to my students about using chat GPT or artificial intelligence or whatever. I'm still relying on their interest in thinking through the thing themselves. We do have the responsibility to assign grades, and then that these grades are then used by other schools and employers and the rest. I don't think that's part of the academic mission. I think this is part of grading. I'm saying it's a part of a bargain that the universities have entered into with society at large for money. You give us something like an indication of how well this student is doing in such and such courses, and then we'll let your institution we'll give your institution some money. But there is, responsibility to grade fairly, and that means to grade the work of the individual student and not of the machines that the student has used. So I'm concerned about this. I haven't altered any of my practices yet. So there's the fear, but embrace it. No, I've got no reason to. The arc of my career, 35 years now, has been toward less technology rather than more. I used to use PowerPoints. I don't do that anymore. Now it's just a whiteboard and a marker. And I wish it were chalk and a green board, but it isn't. So the whiteboard and the marker. So I've been using less and less technology. So I don't think I'm going to be embracing any new
Okay, so
technology.
your world, the world of philosophy, is one and I'll underscore learning and thinking. But when I go into a professional school, I go into medicine, I go into engineering, I go into OT. I'm going into domains where they want to impart upon you with some experience, knowledge that puts you in a unique position in the world, to the point that you're going to make more money than others are going to make, because you're now king of the castle and the client is subjected to your knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe the professional schools that are the ones that are more likely to feel threatened with the emergence of the sort of not anti-knowledge, but knowledge as a commodity. I'm not quite sure I'm talking to the right person when I'm talking about the threat of AI to the university. I should be talking to the professional schools, but I appreciate your perspective on this. But I can see you as a champion of learning, research, and thinking, but maybe not necessarily defending the professional schools against what's going on there.
Yeah, well, no, it worries me for practical reasons that the students in professional schools might be failing to encounter their topics honestly or as directly as they should.
So I've got one more question before I ask the room itself to raise their hands and weigh in, and that is, with the anxiety that you have expressed about whether or not academic freedom is understood, much less being preserved, at some point in time, pressure begins to build, reaction begins to occur. You've asked, can it be restored? Are there grounds for optimism? Are we seeing some limits to this pursuit of social agenda versus the academic?
There are grounds for optimism. There are plenty more grounds, unfortunately, for pessimism. One of the grounds for pessimism is that the displacement of academic values and the displacement of the academic mission from things like the curricula and hiring is going to, I think, for at least 1-2 generations, is going to change the university. One terrible thing that's happening now is that many job ads for professorships come with a requirement that you swear fealty to equity, diversity, and inclusion, right? So there's an ideological litmus test. Now, on the one hand, that's going to weed out some excellent scholars who just don't think that that this is consistent with the university's mission, and that's too bad. And then it's going to bring into the universities people disproportionately will bring into the university people who think this is part of the university's mission, right? So that will change it. It also has the potential to introduce a lot of corruption into the university. People have been maybe not lying, but let's say fudging, exaggerating on their CVs and their resumes ever since there have been CVs and resumes. Padding your resume is not a modern phenomenon. But here, right, you're being asked to demonstrate your commitment to a certain set of values. So people are going to look for opportunities. Young academics are going to look for opportunities that they can then put on their resumes, whether they agree with this ideology or not. Maybe worse still, the best way to deal with that cognitive dissonance of I'm going along with this, but I don't want to go along with it, is to get rid of not wanting to go along with it and pretending that in fact these are your views. So I think that this is a powerful tool for creating a professoriate that cares less about the dispassionate, disputatious inquiry into the world and more about rectifying what they take to be social ills directly, or not through the application of their research, but directly. So these, I think, are very serious grounds for pessimism. Now, grounds for optimism. I do think that there are still plenty of professors who take their classrooms, who take their courses and their programs to be invitations to examine, to explore, and to learn on the parts of their students, and who take their research as an attempt to figure out what's going on, to try to theorize about difficult things and get them right. Now, what has to happen, I think, if these people are to have any effect, two things. One, I think we have to articulate better and disseminate more widely just what the academic mission is, just what it is to be an academic who cares about understanding things and understanding things for their own sake. Part of that is valuing moral intellectual autonomy. You're intellectually autonomous when you want to think for yourself. That is, when you want to believe all and only that which has passed muster against your own epistemic standards, rather than believe because you would like to believe this, believe because you'd like to fit in, believe because it will move you forward in your career. A person is morally autonomous when that person understands the values that they hold, understands the stresses and strains among those values, as well as the ways in which those values are integrated, and is by and large happy with those values, right? So, you have a first order value, say, love of your children, and you reflect on that and you say, yes, I'm pleased to be the sort of person who loves their children. To lack autonomy, in this sense, is for the first order value to be at odds with second order values. You see this most often, most obviously, say in smokers. I want to smoke, but I don't want to smoke, right? So someone who's in that situation with regard to their values is lacking moral autonomy. Now, people who value moral and intellectual autonomy come together in community. They're not going to be infringing upon, violating each other's moral and intellectual autonomy. They're going to be engaged in the work, and the work is trying to figure out how things are. So if we can articulate better the academic mission, what it is to be an academic, what is academics' value, disseminate this more, well, we might have some effect. The second thing we need to do, I think, is create the spaces within our institutions where the tradition of the academic mission, academic engagement can live. That's becoming harder and harder to do. But we don't want, say, 20, 50 years down the road for people to have to reinvent the wheel. We want the practices to survive so that the practices are there, so that when the culture changes, if the culture changes, if the culture changes in the right way, we can again embrace the academic mission.
I'm going to shift gear. I pick up on one of the questions in the chat, which is the relevance of research. And I can recall working with one of the presidents at the University of Alberta some years ago, whose mission was to increase the amount of research funding that it would become literally dominant. And it wanted to be a leading research university. Is the desire of universities to receive and secure research funding, which typically comes either from industry or via government, does that in any way challenge academic freedom on campus?
Well, it can. It needn't. One has to be very careful, though. It certainly can. Ideally, what we would want is a whole bunch of research money coming into the university and then the professors getting their allotment of it, right? Without having to find a research project that is attractive to the funder. We would want the professor to be pursuing his or her own concerns in the research. Now, that's ideal. That's not going to happen. Professors are now saying, well, who are the funders and what do they want to be researched? So we can hope that the professors find research money in areas that interest them, that they're concerned about, that they wish to pursue. And we would hope that the university administrators would argue in their favor. Now, one thing about university research, this is one reason why people outside the university who probably, those people outside the university who don't care whether there's a space in their community for people to get together to think hard about things dispassionately, who don't care about that one way or another, why they might still want to support a university is that if the university if the professors are pursuing their own research interests, as they will, then the research that emerges is trustworthy, or at least people outside the university can see it as trustworthy. Whereas research that emanates from a pharmaceutical company or from a biker gang or whatever, that's potentially tainted in the eyes of people. So what research might people as citizens, institutions within a nation want to use? Well, they would want to use research that they think they can trust. And so the universities should make that case to the funding agencies so that the money isn't so directly targeted in a way that could potentially corrupt the research.
Well, the word should is probably the one underlined there. We're well aware that there are serious concerns.
Yeah.
Research is being tainted in the interests of what the industry may well be seeking, whether it be in the world of tobacco, which we all went through that cycle. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there is a research in healthcare where billions of dollars are involved, where the pharmaceuticals would like to see certain data that may align with their interests. And that researchers may well be compromised. So there is some of the angst about even science being biased. One of the books I had on display here was Anti-Science, is the concerns that even science is being undermined as a system of pursuit in search of truth because the almighty dollar rules.
Well, that's right, and not just industry, but government as well. Certainly, one thing that should matter to all of us as Canadians is the plight of Indigenous people in our nation. Now, if we're going to understand what that plight is and address it, we will want research that uncovers what that plight is, research that is trustworthy, as unbiased, as research can be, has been exposed to the academic community and has been debated. Um, but I don't know that in Canada today, much research about Indigenous Canadians, First Nation Canadians, Aboriginals is trustworthy. Much of it needs first band approval before the researchers can begin their studies. Many possible conclusions that a researcher might draw, are conclusions that that researcher has reason not to draw, non-academic reason not to draw. So I think this is a case where something very important to us, something that should be very important to us, is not being addressed in the way universities should address it, so that politicians and citizens generally can wade through the issues and try to find the best solutions. If we
Um,
can't even identify the problems,
I'm glad to hear that philosophers are not shy.
about
Elevating a discussion about what are sometimes so sensitive that nobody really dares even open up a discussion on those topics. It's a delicate, these are delicate times.
um, that it's we ought not worry about its delicacy. What what should concern us is understanding the this is again the academic mission, understanding what's there, and people outside the universities who are interested in these things, governments or citizens, benefit from research that they can trust.
University of Alberta some years ago found that there was an economic price to be paid depending upon who they might bring on campus as a speaker, a la climate change.
Right.
We've seen sensitivities of an economic nature have a bearing on what universities will or will not do, because you get some extremists protesting that it's not aligned with their interests.
Well, and we need academic administrators who will stand up to that sort of thing.
Oh, have you opened up an interesting topic there? You mean leadership might be relevant at the top of the campus? I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, that if you ever needed leadership in a century, it's now. And that
Yes.
leadership should be able to facilitate that discussion, not only on campus, but serve as a bridge to engage and help communities have that discussion. So it isn't always in the realm of politics.
Hmm.
Deborah, we haven't seen you before. Is there something that would stir you to raise a question or make a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Perry. This is such an interesting conversation. And honest to God, I left university about a year ago because of these issues that we're talking about. The one thing that and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but you mentioned, Perry, that the university funding in Alberta was going to be linked to outcomes, to metrics, right? And in my world, that had a lot to do with innovation and commercialization metrics. And it was hard to accept that, right? I mean, as you said, Perry, I don't think that's happening in Alberta anymore with the change of government. But where do you draw the line with what is the responsibility of the university or the institution to, for instance, translate findings into health and economic benefits for society? I mean, that's a tough question. And I know a lot of universities have become so-called entrepreneurial universities. There's actually literature on that since about the 80s, I think. And some universities in the States, I know U of Calgary has come to call themselves an entrepreneurial university. And, I mean, that was my portfolio, was to lead innovation at the U of A. But at the same time, I still question, is that the right thing? Is that where universities need to be focusing their time, their money, their efforts? So I'm just asking that as a question too.
Research and certainly discovery is part of the knowledge process. Knowledge acquisition, knowledge dissemination is certainly core. Innovation, you would think, would be one of the primary features of a university is discovery, and that's what it often argues, is we want academic freedom to pursue research not necessarily aligned with what the government's interests are, but we'll take your dollar, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I guess how far down that continuum of innovation is the university responsible for? I don't disagree with that. Research and innovation is a mandate. But are you responsible for, is the university responsible for creating companies and commercializing technology and the host of expenses that goes into that as well? And it's fun. It's a very fun world to play in. That's where I played when I was in academia. But where do you kind of draw the line there?
Mark, do you want to jump in here? I mean, I'll make a comment on the way. Some years ago, I was talking to the president of our technology institute, who was thrilled with the idea of getting research dollars that were typically being directed at universities in order that his profs could become like profs at the university. And I got concerned that if we mess up the polytechnical world, which is much more applied, and we accept that, with the world of the universities, which was meant to be more basic, we were going to have a real mess. And I'm afraid we do have that mess, Deborah. It's whatever the universities want to accept, the almighty dollar rules. Mark, you want to jump in? I mean, I think I know where you're coming from, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I would like to hear more from Deborah about this. My view is that a university shouldn't have these offices that are attempting to monetize the research that comes out of that university. Professors are free to become business people and set up companies to do that with others, and there are people in the outside the university in the private sector who could do that. I just don't see that. I wonder what's the academic justification, ground, purpose of the university becoming, whatever it was that these offices do.
Well, they're viewing the university as an economic entity, and that it should be contributing to the economy, which means small business development, lots of jobs, diversity of the economy. We need lithium, we need tritium, we need more. And they're seeing the university as a bastion of knowledge that can contribute to the economic interests of society.
Oh, that's fine. Let the university professors publish and talk and consult and do all the rest.
And Deborah is saying that the university is being told, we'll provide you with more. The more you do, the more dollars we'll give you. We would really like to ratchet up and provide an incentive for more of your time and your facilities to be spent on economic interests that benefit the society.
Right. So then there becomes within the institution a department, within the institution of the university, some non-academic department that oversees collecting the research occurring at the university and finding markets for it. Is that what the...
Yeah, and that's what most universities do. I mean, most of them do have a technology transfer office, and investigators are usually, I think in most places, obliged to report an invention, and then you figure out who's going to own it and who's going to own how much of it, who's going to commercialize it. Sometimes we just would market to other companies that would take on those commercialization activities. So you're licensing out the technology to a company. So, and I don't disagree with all that. I guess my question really is how far down the road should universities be expected to do that instead of having very strong relationships with external entities that will do that?
Right. Yeah. So as soon as these offices begin directing research, which is one of my main concerns, is that professors are now tailoring their research to institutional demands or government priorities or what businesses want, then they're no longer investigating for the sake of investigation, for the sake of understanding. I don't want that to happen. Now, if these offices are bringing money into the university and then that money is used for academic things, well, that's fine, so long as the offices. I just worry about the potential for corruption of the academic mission, the academic character of the university, and I wonder, well, why couldn't groups outside the university be this department? The university, people at the university can communicate with them and work closely with them. All the rest is the thought then that someone else would be getting the money? Well, if the university is getting the money, then it has an incentive to do it. But if it costs more academically, then it's a dangerous thing to do.
Well,
It does cost. I mean, there are some returns because the universities own some of the intellectual property. So in some cases, there are royalties paid back or things like that. But usually you don't make enough to even support the costs of running the unit.
Right.
Well,
I can't have a firm opinion on this, given that I'm so distant from technology and science and its interface with society in general. I'm a humanities professor, but I do certainly worry about the effects that commercialization of research has on research in the university, if the commercialization of the research is part of the university's mandate, if it's something that the university is doing. My vision is that the people at the university publish their research, they disseminate their research, they let the research be known, and then people can take it up and do with it as they want. Some of the people who take it up and do with it at what they want can be the professor, right? The professor can be part of some company. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
while I was underscoring the relevance of leadership in all of this, is there probably is no single right answer. And certainly situations and timing and the politics of the public and the economy all play some role in decision making here. So I don't think we're likely to find the perfect right or wrong answer. Universities are clearly having to appear relevant to a society when the economy is in a mess. And there's likely to be more economic pressure on them to demonstrate their contribution, or when it needs to diversify. And you see other countries. I mean, Israel's a perfect example that sees universities as playing a very relevant role in the mission of the state. The United States clearly sees universities playing a clear role in science and engineering. And as we've seen in Canada, the relevance and emergence of these professional schools in health and education, the social sciences, engineering. I mean, government sees universities as fundamental to the mission of the state and asks universities to play along. And arguing academic freedom from philosophy only goes so far. I'm going to see if I can take a comment that was made in the chat, though, and shape it into a question, Mark, because it was pointing to you. And I know the individual that raised it, who's not with us right now. They've left. They were hesitating to comment about overgeneralizations and crude descriptions of hiring processes. I think this was around the EDI topic that you had made, other than to say I find them deeply disturbing, implying that, if we're going to use EDI as a filtering mechanism, maybe the leaning there is we shouldn't be abandoning merit. But she does go on to say, additionally, you failed to note that administration is largely drawn from faculty on a term-limited basis. But if that's saying it's faculty themselves that are within the administrative role using EDI filtering mechanism, and that the Senate is dominated also by faculty, creating a narrative of a false dichotomy.
Well, I take issue with A couple of things. First of all, university senates are not dominated by professors. Most are about 50% professors. Very few are more than that. Administrators don't enjoy academic freedom in their role as administrators, though they do as professors. So an administrator serves at the pleasure of the president in the role of administrator. If the dean doesn't toe the line, the president can send the dean back to the Department of English or whatever. So the academic administrators sit on Senate. But they don't sit as independent academics, right? Because they must toe the administration line, the president's line. So I think just to speak, ideally, I think sortition would be the way to sit members on a Senate. Random processes, and only professors, no administrators, no students, no alumni. That would be an appropriate academic senate. By having some method of sortition to bring people in, we wouldn't be, the politically active would have no more chance of becoming members of the academic senate than anyone else. I was generalizing somewhat when talking about administrators, talking about hiring, but I think the trend is there. If you go to University Affairs, the publication by the university presidents, and look at the job ads, you'll see that many of them contain requirements that you swear fealty to EDI, and not only swear fealty to it, but include some EDI program that you've been with. It's there. You might also see that at our university, for instance, before you can sit on a hiring committee, you must have a training session from a non-academic administrator in the EDI bureaucracy. We have 4 EDI bureaucrats at our university, only one of whom is an academic administrator, is a professor. This might not be true everywhere. Some places it's less than others. There's the theory that if your university is relatively small, the EDI cohort can take over quite quickly. If your university is large and more diffuse, then some departments will go and some won't. So I acknowledge that reality, that there's no generalization that's true everywhere. But I think that the tendency is there. The trends are there, and they're very worrying. They're anti-academic, and they might have consequences for the 2 generations down the road.
I couldn't ask for a better wrap-up. Mark, this was rich. I think you've honored the question of universities have abandoned their academic mission. I think you've made the point, and you've also indicated that the grounds for optimism are not apparent. The grounds for pessimism are concern, and I think that'll take us into some discussions next week about the relevance of leadership at a time of stress such as we're facing.